role. And hopefully we'll get answers today to legitimate questions about how drugs are priced. But the problem is far greater and more complex than individual companies, or even a set of companies within an ecosystem which is incredibly complex. Why do Americans pay more for certain drugs than patients in other countries? To understand, we need to have a serious effort to navigate the network of perverse incentives throughout the healthcare system. I lived in it for 25 years. I am very kind of aware of it. Taking a substantive look at insurance benefit design, price transparency, regulatory barriers, intellectual property barriers, the perverse effect government discount programs have upon prices charged to commercial patients, etc. One example, just to say again a little bit of complexity here, the 340B drug program resulted in a $54 billion in drug discounts in 2022. But we actually don't know if those discounts lowered prices for the patient who bought the drug. There are reports that patients paid cash when the intermediary took the full price, even though 340B should have lowered it. That is a serious investigation being conducted by this side of the dais that the other side of the dais was not interested in participating in. That is an understanding of an ecosystem. I understand there's no one more eloquent than Chair Sanders on Medicare for All. And we can cherry pick examples of how other countries are doing something better. I can cherry pick the opposite. Canada is struggling, just to show you that there's a complexity here, let me just take an example. Canada is struggling with specialty care. In May of last year, the Canadian government began to send 4,800 Canadians from British Columbia to Washington State to, quote, ensure people have faster access to life-saving radiation treatment, end quote. They can afford their system because we're right next door. Relatedly to this hearing and to that, Alison Decluseau, a Canadian woman, paid for her own treatment in the United States after the Provincial Health Authority in British Columbia denied her access to life-saving chemotherapy. Canada had a lower-cost drug so low they didn't carry the chemotherapy. So she paid for it out of pocket in the United States so she could have life-saving chemotherapy. The United States is not perfect, but if we cherry-pick from other countries, we have to do a more thorough investigation to see is there a balance there. Now let's return to prescriptions. Canadians pay less than we do. Let's figure out why. But let's also point out that public health insurance in Canada only covers 21% of newly developed drugs. Now, maybe that's a trade-off, but I can tell you, you tell an American that they can't have access to a life-saving drug, they're going to see you in court. They're going to sue, and they're going to say, I want that access. The UK only covers 48% of newly available drugs. Americans just would not tolerate that. It's fair to say that Ms. Decluseau, or those radiation treatment patients, or those not getting the newly developed life-saving drugs as quickly, might die in those countries that don't have access to the same treatments as do we in the U.S. These are serious questions. One more time, I'm a doc. I am aware of this. But we need to fully consider all these issues and then maybe bring you in at the end. But we'll bring in with a context which is complete as opposed to isolated. As I said at the start, it would be best if this were a genuine exercise. I am so willing to do the work on this, as are my colleagues. We've shown that willingness on work on PBM reforms and generic drugs. And even though the chair and I got off to a rocky start, we did some pretty good work on that, Mr. Chair. I think we've got some good bipartisan legislation. So this committee, I agree with you, can accomplish that. But I don't want the committee to devolve into a CEO whack-a-mole, ends up with no serious legislation as a result. Further proof of what I consider the unserious and cynical nature of this hearing is that the minority asked the chair to have a witness on the panel that could actually explore some of these issues side by side these CEOs. That was turned down. We wanted an academic expert in drug pricing who could provide unbiased and substantive input to the issues at hand. Our witness was not allowed. He'll be on the next, but the way this works is this gets all the publicity and the next one gets crickets. And so we've not had that opportunity. And I'll also point out we didn't split the majority and minority witnesses into different panels during several hearings which promoted kind of labor union issues. I can think of no reason to not allow our witness to be here now, except perhaps ruining the optics. As I said at our last markup, what ends up being hollow messaging gives D.C. a bad reputation. Folks want real answers. They want relief from high prices. It is in part what we're going to hear today, but it will be separated from a context that would have made it a lot more productive. If you're telling voters you're going to do something when you know at the get-go you'll have no legislative solution which emerges, and that's why folks don't trust. So if we're just looking for a social media clip, then I suppose we've accomplished something. But let's make a difference for the people whom we represent, for those patients in hospitals where I once treated who otherwise would not have access to care. We have the ability to craft meaningful legislation. Let's do it. With that, I yield.
Thank you, Senator Cassidy. Our first witness will be Joaquin Duato, Chairman and CEO of Johnson & Johnson. Mr. Duato has served as Johnson & Johnson's Chairman since 2023 and Chief Executive Officer since 2022. Mr. Duato, thanks very much for being with us.
Do you want to arrange the order a little bit, and we're going to call Commissioner McMurray first. If you go ahead and step up, and I'm going to help you out. I'm going to do you a solid, as my kids would say. The cameras are rolling, and the internet being what it is, this will live on forever. It's an important day in the McMurray household, and I'm going to give you the opportunity to tell us why today's an important day and why you need to go first.
Appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. It's my wife's birthday, and I've got a dinner reservation that is probably in my best interest that I do not miss. And I won't say her age, but she could be the same age as I am today.
Chairman Tiller.
I do have a question, Commissioner. How do you think traffic's going to be along that route tonight?
I am a little nervous at being this time of day. I do have a small buffer, but I do not have an easy button to get there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you for being here. I'll give you the floor, and you and I have talked about some of this previously. Thank you for always having an open door and keeping us informed, but let us know some of the changes you've seen on the House side and any recommended changes you'd like to see us make as well.
Yes, sir, and I believe you guys do have the handout, so we'll jump in. My intent is just to hit the highlights of the budget as presented by the governor and the changes made by the House, and look forward, Mr. Chairman, to presenting to your committee on Monday and take a little deeper dive in why some of these numbers are what they are and why they're very important. On the second slide, I'll just remind everybody when they look at our budget, you're going to see 4 budget fund sources, motor fuel being the first. That transportation trust fund is reflected in the budget, which consists of the alternative vehicle fee, the annual vehicle heavy impact fee, and the hotel fee. That constitutes transportation trust fund. That transit trust fund is reflected in our budget as that ride share, Uber, Lyft, black car service, taxi, what have you. So those dollars are goes to transit. I should say, if I remind you, the transit trust fund up to 10% can be utilized for transit purposes. The other is for basically surface transportation. And I usually say last but not least, general funds are part of our budget. And of course, in Amendment 24, they are a big part of our budget. So I look forward to talking a little bit more about that. On the next slide, slide 3, is just a summation of the different fund sources. And from the base to the amended, recognizing a $1.564 billion increase to the base budget to come up just short of $4 billion. There is exactly a $500,000 increase above what the governor's recommendation was that came from the House, and I'll speak to what that is in a moment. The next slide, I always like to sort of put in a visual format of what the budget really looks like and what it really does. The biggest column on the left is the capital projects budget programs, which consist of several budget programs, all aggregated together. But these are the dollars that are going to advance projects throughout the state. It consists of capital construction, capital maintenance, local roads administration, and the new freight program that was added in the amended 24 budget. So that totals $2.6 billion or dollars, which is about 67% of our entire state budget. The next tallest column there is routine maintenance. It's 13% of our budget. I'll speak to that in more detail. General operations is actually several budget programs aggregated together, that being data collections, planning, program delivery, and departmental administration. So that is what's reflected there. So several budget programs aggregated together. Everything it takes to either develop projects or report on projects, planning projects, and then our overall administration of the department. LMIG, the local maintenance improvement grants, are reflected at 6%. I'll speak more to that in a moment. Bond debt, intermodal, payments to CERTA, and payments to the ATL round out the major budget categories there. On the next slide, we'll take a deep dive into the actual budget itself. And what we've done is just sort of tablize the budget document itself to be a little easier to read. And that starts on page 5. And the first program there under 344.1 is airport aid. There was a little over a $27 million add from the House. The base budget in the governor's rec did not have adjustment or a change to the base. The House redistributed from the freight program $27.004 million to airport aid. So that was a change. The next budget program is capital construction. This has the big add of $659 million to capital construction. That was the big add. There was a small excise add of $8.5 million as well. And as noted, this gives us the ability to increase our capacity to deliver projects and provide funds to expedite our projects in our existing pipeline. And that's one thing I certainly want to highlight is gives us the ability to deliver and advance projects in our existing pipeline, not necessarily new projects that we don't have on our radar yet. And on Monday, Mr. Chairman, at the full Transportation Committee, I will talk about the cost increases that we are working through and living through and what those are and why this money is so important, the $659, to help us keep moving things forward. Next, you will see in the capital maintenance at the bottom of the table, $100 million of state general funds added. That was a change by the House. That also was redistributed from the freight program, which was new, and the line item there was the increased fund for resurfacing needs. I will show you on Monday basically what resurfacing has looked like for the last few years. The spoiler alert is at the national level, construction costs have increased by 60% in the last about 4 to 6 quarters. So tremendous, your dollars are just not going as far as they used to. On the next slide, over on slide 6, I'm just going to draw your attention down to the other major changes, departmental admin. There you see an add of $926,000 in there of state general funds. And the biggest part of that was $500,000 added by the House to provide funds to install the Augusta Canal pedestrian bridge. So we'll have some more conversation and look into the intent of that going forward. There is right above that, about a $3.7 million add as well, and that's going to help address some of our increased cost in IT cost, and also that helps us with a data system that we've had that tracks projects going back to the 90s that needs to be re-procured and updated. So we need to upgrade our data systems. So that's sort of what that is. If you look down toward the bottom of that table on slide 6, you'll see freight infrastructure. Originally, in the governor's recommendation, that was $641 million due to the redistributions that we've talked about so far, being to airport, being to capital maintenance, and to rail, which I haven't talked about. That number now is a $509.7 million add to a new program. And so this is a brand new budget program to work on our freight infrastructure projects that enhance economic growth while promoting freight logistics and safety. And so this is a wonderful add as we have studied jointly, House and Senate have studied freight going all the way back to 2020, and obviously many reports and studies that have been done from planning that recognize the investment we need to make to keep our freight moving across and through Georgia. So this is a fantastic program to have at our disposal, and we will talk a little more in detail about that in your committee on Monday about where these dollars can go. Next below there is the LMIG, which stands for Local Maintenance Improvement Grant Program. This is the formula program for cities and counties through formula distribution of where they have dollars to do projects at the local level. The $5.79 million add in motor fuel is representative of the change in excise tax from the base to the amended year. So this represents 10%. Now, in the governor's rec, there was $200 million added to the LMIG program as state general funds. And if you flip the slide, you will see now that $200 million has been redistributed over to a program called Local Roads Administration, which allows for us to administer and help finance or provide finance for local delivered projects. The intent of this is, by law, in the LMIG program, there's two statutes, one that define the LMIG program and what it is and how much of excise collections go to it, which is between 10 and 20% statutorily. They don't have to be appropriated to LMIG. And then there was a provision when the T-SPLOST or the TIA regions passed, there was a provision in Title 48 that requires a match of either 10% if you're in a regional T-SPLOST or TIA area, like we have the four regions that are under there, or 30% if you're a county outside of that. And so by making this move of putting the $200 million in local roads administration, that would not require local government, cities and counties to have to put a match up. We will simply distribute the money to the cities and counties under the same formula we have as LMIG, but by putting it under local roads administration, it does not require match. So I think that would be a very welcome move by ACCG and GMA, who certainly would like that. And we've talked to both executive directors of GMA and ACCG a week or so ago and trying to understand their challenges. Some of the challenges they have is with match, they have to go back through a budget process to create match or find the money for matching LMIG, and they all have different budget cycles and what have you. So no match obviously is more desirable, and we can move this money a lot more agile than what the cities and counties may have to work through their own budget processes, of which I learned of. There are many different budget processes that they have to work through. So that's just the detail on that. As we go through, I'll flip over very quickly and get over to on the next slide, which is 8. Just highlight an ad there. Again, $2.3 million was added. And if you out of the 6.5, let's look at the 6.5. 2.3 million was added for a couple of things. There is out of the 6.5, $1 million is a one-time match for updating the state rail plan. The Federal Railroad Administration requires every 5 years a state does a rail plan update. So this is just a one-time so that we can match the federal funding to develop the plan. There's a small amount, $102,000 out of the 6.5 million is there because we, as Georgia DOT, are required to provide something called state safety oversight of MARTA's rail system. And so this was over in transit. The FTA requires that not be in our transit budget, but over in our rail budget. So this is why it's recognized now in rail and not in transit. And there's also a $1.2 million operations out of the 6.5 for our operations of the state rail program. If you look under the fund sources, the 6.5 is up under state general funds. Right below that is locomotive diesel funds, which are recognized basically as state general funds, but there was a provision of law that said the sales tax on diesel that they use in railroad locomotives is appropriated to our rail program. So that's what that locomotive diesel funds are at 8.3. It did not change. But in that provision was that those dollars are, by formula, allocated back to the rail operators, short line rail operators and Class 1 rail operators, which doesn't have a provision for us to operate. So that's why we have 1.2 million out of the 6.5 up there that actually pays for our staff and our consultant resources to run the rail program. So sorry, that's a little bit of a deeper dive in rail, but I certainly wanted to explain what all that means. On the next slide, slide 9, I'll just draw your attention to routine maintenance, $32.4 million add into our routine maintenance budget. And that simply helps to deal with the increased cost that we are seeing through materials and contracting. And I'll show you on Monday how our dollars have stayed sort of the same, but our ability to contract and do work has certainly diminished due to increased cost. So I just draw your attention to this, since that was a rather large add. And we'll look at, I think, next slide, on slide 10 is transit. And the only change there was the one-time pay supplement. I should have said that at the on the onset. Each of these budget programs that have people in them, and does have the one-time adjustment in there, and we certainly are very appreciative to the governor and for you both, for the Senate and the House, for supporting that one-time supplement to our employees. It means a lot, and it certainly deserves recognition and a word of thanks. So thank you all for that consideration. Mr. Chairman, that's a very quick overview of a really great budget, and I do want to say a big thank you to everybody, including the governor, for recognizing over $1.5 billion into our budget to really help us do some big things. The freight we talked about, and just dealing with the capital construction of the pure increased cost. We're seeing widening roads from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. There's 119% more than it was back in 2020. And so the dollars just are not going as far as they used to. That capital construction add of $659 will absolutely help us advance to deliver what we have and pull some projects in sooner rather than later, because nothing ever gets any cheaper the longer we go. So this is really good news, and we'll talk about working through those projects list and what it takes to develop all that, such that we can come back and show you what we intend to do with this great money that has been recognized in our budget.
Great. That's fantastic. Thank you. Any questions from the committee? I think you were so thorough, or
It's late in the day.
you have strong support in making your dinner on time, one of the two. I'm not sure which, but thank you for being here today. Tell your wife we said happy birthday.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And enjoy your evening. We'll see you on Monday.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, next up, we're going to get back to our original order here. Spencer Moore, DDS, come on forward.
Mr. Chairman.
Best dressed man in the Capitol. Almost as well dressed as Leader Gooch. He found a new tailor.
Oh, really?
Recently, so
He didn't tell me about that.
Yeah, you might want to get with him and
get
a few tips on.
He didn't tell me about that. Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Certainly thank you all for having the department here today. The information that I'm going to discuss can be found on page 1 and 2, I think, of the tracking sheet that you have in front of you. I have a short presentation that I believe is only 8 slides. We can get through them pretty quickly, but let me first start by saying thank you to this body, of course, to our governor, as well as the House for their support of the department over not just this past year, but many years in order to get us into a much better place. And it's my hope that you and your offices are hearing less complaints about things that may, as far as transactions that occur at our centers. I'll start with page 3 of the report, or the PowerPoint that I provide there to each of you. It's a short PowerPoint, but I love to give you an overview. Is it part of? When I give you that package.
I don't think we have your PowerPoint.
We didn't give that to him? Did we give him physical copies?
Yeah.
I don't think we have those.
I didn't even see that.
All right,
Just give us a second, we'll get those passed around.
All right,
There,
good
there,
deal.
there. Perfect.
okay.
Thank you.
All right. And live in color is probably a little bit better. All right, we'll get to page 3 on the PowerPoint presentation. And first, I'd like to start with the fact that we are a leader across the nation. Many of you will hear if you travel that there's a Real ID compliance day that's coming up May of 2025 for domestic travel. Georgia's in a very great position in comparison to the just 55 or so % of the U.S. jurisdictions being compliant with Real ID. Georgia's at 99.876%. One of the leaders, as I noted, in the entire nation. Our staff has done tremendous work since we implemented that law in 2012 in getting citizens on board in that program. You'll also note that we have 8.6 million valid active drivers in our state. Many of them who visit us annually, 2.398 visitors who come into our 67 centers, each year. I'd like to provide this at a glance because it gives you a really good overview of the department, the things that we're seeing, the people that we're supporting. And you'll note that colored map shows where we are in the state, locations, the 67 locations that we have. If you'll note the stars, those are also locations in which you supported us to either expand a building or build a new one in order to provide services. Many of those new buildings are CDL sites where we know we need to improve the number of CDL drivers that are in our state. Moving on to page 4, certainly in each of the departmental as well as license issuance and regulatory compliance areas of our budget, we are super excited about the $1,000 salary supplement that our staff received. It brought about a very positive morale boost for our staff. And moving on into specific agency requests, you'll note line 118.2. Each year, around every 10 years, our agency goes through a process where we, for security reasons, change our driver's license. And in doing so, traditionally we have come to this body requesting funds for the procurement of an RFP development consultant. And what this person or this group does for the agency, it ensures that when we're putting this RFP together, we're doing so in the very best manner in order to prevent it to go into protest, which has happened in many years in the past. So we're requesting $150,000 with this line item request in order for us to help start that process, for which you see our current contract expires in July of 2027, and it takes us roughly 2 years or more, a little bit over 2 years, to go through a successful procurement, get that person or group onboarded, and ensure that we continue without any delays in our driver licensing program. Next slide is slide 5, and it goes into line 119.2. This is a car production server migration service upgrades. There are 2 components of this request. The first one is actual migration of an AWS cloud and security enhancements for our current vendor group that provides our issuance process. Our current data center is located in Dallas, Texas. We have a backup in Pasadena, California. But the 86 million records that we have for customers who have come into our driver's license office over the years is housed in that database. What we're seeking to do, just like we have been doing with GTA and our transition of our servers from data centers into the cloud, we are seeking to enhance our security element as it relates. Putting this information, 3.9 million of that request will go into a AWS GovCloud platform. These are the highest standards of security in FedRAMP and U.S. hosted only, and U.S. citizen access only. The latest image comparison, this is our ability, if you did not know this, at the point of issuance of a driver's license, we compare the photo image of the individual who was taking that photo in front of us in the building to the one that they took at their last visit. And at night, we run that photo against the entire database of 86 million records to ensure that no one else is attempting to be someone in that database. And that's a part of the system that we're hoping to move to this GovCloud platform. Next, on page 6 is the additional portion of that request, $3,954,484. And this is for the equipment replacement for each of the 705 workstations that are listed or in each of our 67 locations. We did this back in FY17. It is for the purchase of things that goes in that workstation to include monitors, scanners, desktop printers, as well as the CPU itself, fingerprint readers. Every individual who logs onto a workstation at the Department of Driver Service, we capture their fingerprint at the point that they log on to ensure that the person we know who did the transaction that transpired, as well as the point of sale device, which we use Clover today, the camera and the camera towers. We are looking to replace this equipment. It's approximately 7 years old, it says here, but it's approaching 8 years old and at end of life. We're seeking to replace those. The last request that we have is 119.3, and that is a postage rate increase of $341,000. And that is due to the increase of postage that has occurred. I have a listing at the bottom that will show you where we've gone, where we've come from and where we are now. Just recently, in January 21st, essentially we're paying 68 cents, where we were back in 2019, we're paying 55 cents. And what you will see at the top of this chart is each year, FY22 and 23, the agency essentially had to absorb a little bit over $357,000 in 22, $370,000 in 23, and we are already at $332,000 as the first 6 months of this year. As volume increases, the number of people that come into our state, and we're having to send everything from a license renewal statement to a general renewal statement, super speeder notices, et cetera. It is a pretty large cost to the agency. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes the request for the agency for the amended. Certainly happy to answer any questions. Again, we certainly appreciate all the help that this body has provided the agency in this amended budget and as well as in the prior budgets.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate your informative presentation. Are there any questions from the committee? Chairman Burns.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner. We appreciate your work.
Yes, sir.
And I appreciate the efforts you've made to improve services. That's really been important. I want to just ask you to flesh out a little bit about your security and your move to GovCloud.
Yes, sir.
Right now, you are on a traditional server system, is that correct?
Yes, sir. We're on a traditional service system. The initial site is in Dallas, as I indicated.
Yeah,
Backup is in Pasadena.
And then how many other states utilize the secure platform that AWS provides? Is that a standard?
Well, it is certainly. I'm not sure of other states, and now I can't speak for them and the number of states that use the AWS Cloud, GovCloud. But what we do know is And this is because of our migration from our current servers from the North Atlanta Data Center into the GovCloud through GTA, that this is the most secure way in which to house our data.
Very good. And if I could, Mr. Chairman, I want to follow up a little bit about, we've been working with Motor Voter for quite a while, and
Yes,
we
sir.
utilize the driver's license as an opportunity to provide an initial registration as well as renewal. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. What we do is we pass on information that's received to our agency over to the Secretary of State's office, and they, of course, pass that on to their local boards of elections.
Right. And we're moving from an opt-out to an opt-in approach. Is that fair? We may not be there yet, Mr. Chairman, but as we move to a situation where part of our challenge with using Motor Voter has been we get a large number of duplicates because people come in and say, of course I want to be registered to vote. Well, they already are.
That's correct.
And so we generate that. Sometimes we get a large number of duplicates.
Yeah, as a part of the Motor Voter law, as I recall, and my general counsel is not here, she would be the first to speak.
She is here.
She is here.
She is here. Okay.
She is. Might she come up, but she can certainly come up and help me here. But as far as Motor Voter is concerned, I think as a part of being a part of Motor Voter, each time that an individual comes in to receive a service, it's our obligation to send that information over to the Secretary of State's office. So that duplicate process, we agree, but we're obligated to send it when people come in.
I understand. And you're just transferring that information to the Secretary of State. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then my concern there is the Secretary of State may share information with other third parties that would be based on the data you provide to them. And we appreciate y'all working jointly with them, but we want to make sure that these voter rolls are as clean and as accurate as they can be.
We certainly support that. And, from our standpoint, we simply want whatever the law tells us to do, that's exactly what we'll do.
Thank you for your help. And again, I appreciate your focus on security.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
He called you up and didn't even need you. Thanks for
That's right. That's pretty good.
All right, next up, we've got Office of Highway Safety.
It's a hard act for Mr. Chairman for me
Well.
to follow.
Your friends are abandoning you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to present. Thank you to the rest of the committee for being here.
Do y'all have a packet that we don't have?
No, sir.
Okay,
Okay,
perfect.
good.
Just want to make sure.
We're going to be short and quick so that you can get out of here. Let me defer your attention to page 20, line 39.11. We just want to take the opportunity to say thank you to the governor and you all's consideration for giving us that one-time $1,000 increase. And unless the committee have any questions for me, I'm going to defer my time to the Driver Safety Commissioner.
I don't see any questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I'll just bring your attention to line 268.2. This is a reduction of funds to align with, sorry, I'm on the wrong page here.
That's on page 6 for members of the committee.
269.2.
4.
4, yes, sir. It's a reduction in funds of driver's education training in accordance with the Joshua's Law collections. The governor's recommendation was to reduce that by $1.425 million. The House reduced that reduction by $1,068,000, reflecting $357,000 overall reduction. Just to give you a little background, those funds are collected on a surcharge on traffic citations for the state of Georgia. What's collected in one fiscal year is allocated the next year, and the original budget is an estimation of $2.9 million. And then in the amended budget, it's trued up. And unfortunately, in 2022, the bill sunset was not able to come up for a vote on sine die. And there was a significant reduction in funds collected, and we're still trying to catch up with that shortfall. So that's why there is a reduction, and that's the position that we're in at this time.
Where is that up here? And the House did they pull from? Where'd the House pull it from?
Because of that, they were trying to find
Any questions? I don't see any questions. You all lived up to your promise, being brief. Thank you all for being here today.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Didn't they reduce the reduction? So they actually added one. Okay, I got you. No, you're good. All right, next up is Georgia Ports Authorities. Jamie, come on. Ms. Miller, are you here to present or are you here to hang out?
I'm hanging out.
Okay, just wanted to be sure we didn't miss you, and if, not that I would have moved you to the top of the agenda necessarily, unless you have a dinner, but we certainly did not want you just to sit out there.
She's my emotional support.
Yeah.
I just can't get enough transportation. I just can't get enough.
I thought you were here for me.
I'm here.
Oh, thank you. All right, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, as you are aware, Ports Authority is not typically in the budget. This year being one of the few exceptions where we are in on the back side of the handout I passed out there, you'll see $6.094 million, which is a pass-through through us to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for a harbor modifications project in Brunswick. Of course, the federal government owns and maintains the shipping channel. When there are new construction modifications to the channel, that is a state-federal cost share, which is the case with this project. Just to explain the project itself a little bit, the illustration there probably doesn't make it crystal clear, but this particular project, which is a 50-50 cost share, so the total project cost is about $12.1 million. It does three things. It creates two bin wideners in the river. If you're familiar with the Golden Ray incident that occurred a few years ago, these bin wideners are on either side of the location where that incident occurred. They are specifically for facilitating transit of larger vessels that are calling today at the port. And then the third component is an adjustment to the turning basin off of Colonel's Island where the ships turn around, again, to, in this case, do two things: accommodate larger ships and also to accommodate the allowance for the new berth that we are building there at Colonel's Island. So again, this particular item is a pass-through to the Corps of Engineers. It is not a GPA CapEx project, and we are appreciative of Governor Kemp putting it in his budget in the House, continuing that funding, and we hope that you will see fit to do the same. If there are any questions, happy to answer them.
Any questions from the committee? How's the port traffic? I think that there was a little bit of fall off at one point in the last 6 months or so, and I think it stabilized. Are you all kind of?
It has. If you look at the peak of the pandemic, if you will, or result at the outset of the pandemic, that was a dip. But what that did to us on the container side was it made us have exponential growth in a compounded window of time. We had to do some very unusual things to accommodate that influx of cargo. Interestingly, particularly relative to this budget item, on the RoRo side, or roll-on, roll-off, the cars and machinery, there was actually a dip. And so today, the container traffic has normalized, if you will. If you look at a 5-year window, we're on the same compound annual growth rate curve that we were on prior to 2020. And so the compounded annual growth rate looks good, even if this year is off of the unusual peak highs. But on the RoRo side, we just had our busiest year ever. And that portends to be the case going forward. Part of the adjustments for accommodating the increase in container traffic is moving some of the RoRo traffic that was in Savannah down to Brunswick and some other cargo. So Brunswick is very much on an upswing as Savannah continues to grow with containers. So that normalization we feel like has occurred. January was a growth year. The rest of this fiscal year will not be tremendous growth, but we do anticipate it being ahead of where we were for these months last year, if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you for being here with us today.
My pleasure.
Leader Goose, just for the good of the order, when I saw you earlier, you had a lot of lapel pins on. Have you lost some lapel pins? I'm just worried. I want to make sure you're okay.
I may have lost one, but I'll find it.
What you got the UGA champions left. You had the G on your right lapel.
Oh, that's what fell off.
You lost that? Okay.
Let's see, I have some more.
there you go. Here, let me.
You got, see, this is what I,
Chair.
members of the committee, this is what I was doing. I was working an angle to get you a dog right there. All right,
He's run out, he's run out of.
we'll give it to we'll give it to we'll give it to Senator Halpern. We'll give it to Senator Halpern.
I'll bet if we increase the budget at UGA,
I bet if we could get a pin for the port, that's what we need.
There you go.
I would give it to you right now.
Well, thank you, members of the committee. We are adjourned. And we're doing Green Door Monday? Leader Gooch, that's your understanding? And when do y'all think we'll see this budget on the floor?
Blake's going to.
Next week?
Weekend. I
We'll s-
think it'll be Wednesday or Thursday.
All right. Fantastic.
Next week.
All right. We'll see everybody then.